Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Thursday, May the 27th, 2021. So, big news for the Republican Party. Paul Ryan is returning to save the day. Excited? I know I am. According to CNN, former House Speaker Paul Ryan is set to criticize former President Donald Trump and his hold on the Republican Party during a speech Thursday night. Ryan, a critic of the former president in the past, is expected to say at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California, that Republicans must move away from the, quote, populist appeal of one personality because then we're not going anywhere, unquote. Once again, we conservatives find ourselves at a crossroads. And here's one reality we have to face. If the conservative cause depends on the populist appeal of one personality or on second-rate imitations, then we're not going anywhere. Voters looking for Republican leaders want to see independence and mettle, Ryan is expected to say. Yes, the personality of one person. You mean like Ronald Reagan? That fellow? Yes, Reagan. Reagan is going to come back from the dead to save us. Reagan last ran for office in 1984, which means that the youngest people living in the United States who ever voted for Ronald Reagan are 55 years old. But when conservatives talk about the future, they talk about the past, which is yet another reason why you should never call yourself a conservative, because conservatism is owned by the Paul Ryans of the world. CNN continues, although Ryan doesn't mention Trump by name in his criticism, the expected remarks by the Republican Party's 2012 vice presidential nominee will add him to a growing list of establishment Republicans who are publicly objecting to Trump's grip on the party. Like-minded Republicans, including Ryan's predecessor, teak-faced crybaby John Boehner, have lamented the current direction of the party, which has actively rebuked and ostracized members who have taken on Trump and his brand of populist and nativist politics. The excerpts indicate that Ryan plans to outline a path forward for the Republican Party in the Biden era. According to the excerpts, the only time Ryan will reference Trump by name is to praise him for how, at the start of 2020, the U.S. saw such incredibly powerful and inclusive economic growth, though he suggests more credit is due to Reagan-inspired policy rather than Trumpism. It was the populism of President Trump in action tethered to conservative principles, he is expected to say. In his speech, he also plans to warn his fellow conservatives at being drawn into cultural battles with Democrats. No, you don't want to get into cultural battles with Democrats because you've determined already that you're going to lose them all. You're going to throw every one of those battles. And what do cultural battles have to do with the worship of mammon, which is what Paul Ryan is all about? Ryan is expected to say, as the left gets more woke, the rest of America is getting weary. It's exhausting. And we conservatives have to be cultural, not to get caught up in every little cultural battle. Yes. How about the sexual mutilation of children? A little cultural battle like that. More from Ryan. Sometimes these skirmishes are just the creation of outrage peddlers detached from reality and not worth anybody's time. They draw attention from the far more important case we must make to the American people. Paul Ryan talks a lot about principles. What are Paul Ryan's principles? Tax cuts, especially capital gains tax cuts. Israel and exporting American jobs overseas and importing foreigners to take American jobs. Those are Paul Ryan's principles. That's what he's got. Ryan will also criticize President Joe Biden, claiming he is pursuing an agenda more leftist than any president in my lifetime. In 2020, the country wanted a nice guy who would move to the center and depolarize our politics. Instead, we got a nice guy pursuing an agenda more leftist than any president in my lifetime. Is that why people vote for president? Because they're looking for a nice guy? Joe Biden is not a nice guy, not by any reasonable standard. These policies might have the full approval of his progressive supporters, but they break faith with the middle-of-the-road folks who made the difference for him on election day. And of course, that's why the Republicans shouldn't make a fuss about these little cultural battles. No, Joe Biden, he's a really nice guy, but he's misinformed, perhaps a little deluded. Ryan, who decided to retire from Congress in 2018, has kept a relatively profile since leaving Capitol Hill. And yes, that's probably a good idea for him, given that when Republicans had control of both the Senate and the House, they pissed it away under Ryan. Build the wall? No. The invasion of America from Central America, I guess that's another one of those little cultural battles. Besides, all these people from Mexico and Central America are natural-born entrepreneurs with strong, principled, conservative values. Ryan was seen as a rising star in the Republican Party before facing a high level of scrutiny from Democrats and Republicans alike over his relationship with Trump, with whom he occasionally clashed. Yes. Paul Ryan has made no secret of his admiration of Ayn Rand. Laterally, he's come to say, oh, that's just a myth. No. I suppose talking about Ayn Rand constantly and handing copies of Atlas Shrugged to your staffers, no, that doesn't indicate a tremendous admiration. Let's see. According to Wikipedia, Ryan has a bachelor's degree in economics and political science from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, where he became interested in the writings of Friedrich Hayek, Ludwig von Mises, and Milton Friedman. Hayek, Mises, and Friedman were not conservatives. And of course, Ryan got into politics immediately after graduating from university, insinuating himself as a staffer in the Republican Party. It's very clear that Ryan, despite his claims to be some sort of everyman, was only ever interested in politics. A few months after Bob Caston lost to Democrat Russ Feingold in the 1992 election, Ryan was a staffer for Caston. Ryan became a speechwriter for Empower America. Remember where conservatives love that word, empower? Now, freedom works. And there's no space between freedom and work, so you can see how forward-looking that organization must be. A conservative advocacy group founded by Jack Kemp, Gene Kirkpatrick, and William Bennett. Now, there are some figures from the past, including Jack Kemp, one of the stupidest men ever to rise to a high level of influence in the Republican Party. Ryan later worked as a speechwriter for Kemp, the Republican vice presidential candidate in the 1996 U.S. presidential election. Kemp became Ryan's mentor, and Ryan has said he had a huge influence. You see, immigrants, legal or illegal, wherever they come from, are good because they raise the GDP, besides the fact that they're all natural-born entrepreneurs and have very strong, principled, conservative family values. There's a story on this same topic from Charlie Spearing at Breitbart. In February 21, Ryan joined Solomir Capital, a private equity firm founded by Utah Senator Mitt Romney's son, TAG, T-A-G-G. Oh, golly. America, hereditary oligarchy? No, it is nothing like that. What is Paul Ryan's experience in business, by the way, so that he would be asked to join at a high-level private equity firm? In August 2020, Ryan also joined Executive Network Partnering Corp, a blank check acquisition company. He also serves on the board of Fox, the parent company of Fox News. Yes, indeed. Principle, and Paul Ryan's principles, his personal principles, apart from his political ones, are losing gracefully and then profiting thereby. Another relic is in the news. This is a story from Jordan Williams at The Hill. Rootless cosmopolite Mitt Romney blasts political extremes in speech accepting JFK award. He blasted political extremes on the left and right during his acceptance speech for the John F. Kennedy Library's Profile in Courage Award. In a virtual speech, Romney said that many have been disappointed by those who've chosen the easy way, playing to the crowd. Yes, playing to the crowd, playing to the electors, rather than playing to Wall Street or to communist China, itching the ears of the resentful with conspiracies and accusations. I take heart in the fact that such displays are still newsworthy and are generally met with disdain, Romney said. He continued that many are guilty of a faultless, reprehensible, though similarly consequential. He accused the right of spreading false claims about elections, tech, and vaccine falsities, while accusing the left of hyper-woke accusations. You see, it all balances out. Mitt Romney is dead square in the middle. He's not going to fight for his people because he doesn't have any. Quote, some of us on the right infect the nation with claims of election fraud, tech, and media outrages. Oh, tech and media outrages. Oh, more conspiracy theories, even vaccine fantasies. The GOP senator said the squabble diverts attention from the challenges facing America, like climate change, the national debt. Oh, and let's talk about all the valuable work that Mitt Romney and the Republican Party did in the past to deal with the national debt. You could talk about Ronald Reagan's administration, where the debt and the deficit absolutely soared. But the Reaganites don't like to talk about that. Romney was presented the award for being the first U.S. senator to vote to convict a president of their own party on an impeachment charge. Yes, the centrists love a rat. The Utah Republican was the sole GOP senator to vote to convict Trump on one of three charges related to Trump's effort to press Ukraine to investigate President Biden and his son, Hunter Biden's dealings in the Ukraine. Yes, absolutely outrageous of Trump to say to the Ukraine, it's our money who is propping you up. You've got a huge corruption problem in your country, and I expect you to do something about it. Unlike, say, Joe Biden, who went to the Ukraine and said, you have to fire the prosecutor who's looking into my corrupt, crackhead, incestuous son, Hunter Biden, or the aid will stop. Somehow that is not controversial. Romney in February joined 6 other GOP senators in convicting Trump, now out of office, for inciting the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol that led to 5 deaths. Oh, it led to a suicide. Did it? He has since faced scrutiny from within his party over the vote. Speaking to late-night host Jimmy Fallon after his speech, Romney joked that he wouldn't have imagined receiving the award, but still called it humbling. This is not something I would have imagined. More likely to have found little green man on Mars. It's very humbling, but a great honor, and obviously which comes from family that has sacrificed enormously over the years for our country. The Kennedy family. Okay. Yes. I suppose Reaganite Republicans love the Kennedys now. Now, of course, when we're talking about nice guy Republicans, John McCain is no one's idea of a nice guy, certainly as nasty as Joe Biden, hence his nickname, Senator McNasty. But in a failed attempt to get the populists on board, McCain chose the governor of Alaska, Sarah Palin, as his vice presidential pick, which didn't work out too well for McCain because Palin, for all her faults, was soon discovered to be much more popular than Romney himself. So his campaign extraordinarily started leaking negative stories about Sarah Palin during the election. Of course, the Palins are in the news again. Here's a story by Sarah Abraham for the Daily Mail. Bristol Palin revealed she had a tummy tuck years ago as she shared a side of herself that her followers have yet to see. The Dancing with the Stars alumni, or alumna, someone might say, 30, and daughter of Sarah Palin, wanted to get real as she shared an Instagram post with her followers where she showed off her scar from a surgery done in 2018. In the video, she hiked down her gym shorts, hubba hubba, to display her toned tummy before revealing her scar as she teased, "Here's something I don't share, except that you are sharing it. The scar from the tummy tuck I had years ago." The procedure would have taken place around the same time as the reality star's split from husband Dakota Meyer in February 2018. In the short clip, Bristol spoke about previously feeling insecure and only posting curated content before bravely feeling inclined to share a new truth about her body. Let's get real for a sec. I post what I want y'all to see from decent angles and not from insecurities and scars, visible or not. Here's something I don't share, the scar from the tummy tuck I had years ago, she said as she showed off her faded incision on her right hip to her 571,000 followers. Her camera hovered over the scar, which she later revealed came from a procedure in 2018 done by Dr. Rose from Corpus Christi, Texas. As she panned over the incision, she spoke about comparison being a thief of joy. Comparison can be the thief of all joy. Don't let this place have you comparing your own worth and stealing your joy. Way too easy to compare ourselves on here. Just a reminder not to. That is why you are constantly posting photos of your body on Instagram, because you don't want comparisons to be made. And later on in her Instagram story, she took time to answer fans' questions about the surgery as she revealed the doctor who performed the surgery was incredible. But the Teen Mom OG star also said it was the worst pain of her life despite having no regrets. The pair, Dakota Meyer, ex-husband, shared daughter Sailor Grace, 5, and Atlee Bay, 4, and she also has Trip with 2 P's with her ex-husband Levi Johnston. And there's many pictures of her with her children, and here's a picture of her with her ex-husband, and she is pulling out a sweatshirt which has on it in block capitals, "World's Greatest Ex-Wife." I guess that's the sort of thing that women aspire to be now. Bristol Palin's life has been an absolute train wreck. I suppose it wasn't helped by her dotty mother deciding to introduce Levi Johnston into their house when Palin was a teenager. What's the worst thing that could happen? Well, I suppose hunky Levi could knock up your daughter, which is exactly what happened. Later, she became a spokesperson for the abstinence movement, which is a curious choice, I must say, and became more curious later on. Sexual abstinence is, of course, a very good thing, but I don't believe in these sexual abstinence campaigns because they're rather like campaigns against heroin. Oh, sex is just so amazing. It's so amazing. Sex, 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 sex. Don't do it. That's a very bad presentation. So Bristol Palin got paid a fair amount of money for being an abstinence campaigner. This is a woman who, I guess she treasures her privacy. She appeared on The Secret Life of the American Teenager, the 2010 season of Dancing with the Stars, the TLC documentary Sarah Palin's Alaska, a rock band video. She had her own reality series called Bristol Palin, Life's a Trip, and then Dancing with the Stars again, and then Teen Mom OG. Yes, the abstinence campaigner appears on a show, an MTV show, one of the worst cultural influences in America, where teenagers who get knocked up are made famous. And here's the best part. In June of 2011, which is 10 years ago, Palin's memoir, Not Afraid of Life, My Journey So Far, co-authored by Nancy French, was released. And who's Nancy French? Why, she is the wife of conservative luminary David A. French. Her husband, Dakota Meyer, is a Medal of Honor winner. His life appears to be an absolute train wreck as well. And Bristol Palin, of course, got into the traditional celebrity child custody dispute. Perhaps we'll see her one day on The View. Let's go to the chat. Hello to Dan, our valiant moderator, Chad Chadson. Thank you for your service. Palpicasso 88, John S. Gameston says, Boehner didn't work, so they're dragging out Ryan again. Let's hope they need to drag another fossil again and again. Hello to Chogokin666 and Jay Miller. Andron says, Ronald Wilson Reagan, 6 letters each. I had some lefty friends who used to like to point that out. Yes, they used to call him Ronnie Reagan and seriously argued that he wanted to blow up the world. Reagan was sincerely interested in peace, and he managed to achieve a peace with the Soviet Union. One could argue that he broke the Soviet Union. He had some part in it, except that, Gorbachev. He pulled the temple down on himself and on the Communist Party. Steve says, surrendering cultural battles has worked out great. Chogokin666 says, small government, lower taxes. When have so-called conservatives ever instituted smaller government? Never, never, never. Jay Miller says, LOL at espousing Reagan. Is this for real? Paul Ryan is giving credit to Reagan for Trump's economic success. Roulette cracked. Hello. Don Willis says, we lost the culture war equals simp news flash. Don Willis, defend the Constitution. It defends you. I think Ryan was created in the same lab as Tony Blair, says Roulette Crack. Yes, I've made that joke myself. I'm sure many people have made it. It's an obvious joke, but it's funny because it is true. Hello to G's He's Tall. Metal Mike says Ayn Rand was fun reading in high school. I guess Paul Ryan stopped learning at around that time. Well, of course, Ayn Rand is teenagers get into Ayn Rand, on the screw you dad basis. Here's how the world really works. It's all about selfishness, the virtue of selfishness, which is very appealing to me because I'm a teenager and I'm part of the most selfish cohort in the world. Jack Kemp is a mentor. Yes, says Gameston. We must admit Jack Kemp looked good on a football card, said Don Willis. Well, he was a pretty good quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. Popcasso 88 says Jack Kemp's solution to the LA riots was enterprise zones in the ghetto. Yes, I remember enterprise zones very well. They never really took off for some reason. Oh, yes, Mitt and Tag. Most of these goofball names come from the mothers. And of course, everyone is marked or scarred, if you will, by their given name. But Sarah's a good name. How come she couldn't have picked names like that? Instead of sine, cosine, and hypotenuse. I just think that when you give a child an obviously made up name, you are sending an unfortunate message to that child that you are unique. Of course, all people are unique, but you are ever so special. You are a shining star. And I have acknowledged that from the moment of your birth by giving you a totally unique name, because you wouldn't want to share in our collective history, in our civilization, by having a name that others have had. What else do we have here? Romney is like mustard in a milkshake, says Don Willis. Yeah, y'all. Bristol Palin saying y'all. I guess y'all and folks. Pat Buchanan used that word, folks, but Pat Buchanan comes from below the Mason-Dixon line. But y'all, Bristol Palin, are you from the South? Are you black? No, you are not. But everyone is doing it now. Roulette Crack says the days of out in the open, blustering, hubris, gloating, bloated medieval tyrants have returned. GOPers are preoccupied with being liked. How's that working out, says Dawn Willis. Yes, Chogokin 666 agrees with me about people north of the Mason-Dixon line saying y'all. There's a lot of Canadians who now say y'all. There's people on the left, the far left, radical left, who think it makes them look folksy. Hey, I'm just a regular person. I work for an NGO, and God knows what I do, but I'm just a regular person like you. Metal Mike says, not to mention the extended family members, truck, and upgrade. Yes, I always appreciated Idiocracy reference. Don Willis says a quote from Charles Bukowski, boring damned people all over the earth propagating more boring damned people. What a horror show. The earth swarmed with them. And from Halper, Senators Cleet and Balk Romney. So what am I going to talk about now? We are going to, oh yes, I wanted to talk about superfluous people. Actually, perhaps superfluous is not the best word. Parasitical would probably be more to the point. There is a fellow called Alex Hanna. I talked a few months ago about this crisis at Google because an Eritrean immigrant to the United States who was working on ethical AI was either fired or resigned. What is ethical AI, you ask? Well, see, the problem with AI has been discovered over and over again, and will continue to be discovered, is that it comes up with patterns which offend people. AI demonstrates that some people are better at other things than others, and this is not equitable. So, yes, this is from March of this year. In September, Timnit Gebru, then co-leader of the ethical AI team at Google, sent a private message on Twitter to Emily Bender, a computational linguistics professor at the University of Washington. Hi, Emily. I'm wondering if you've written something regarding ethical considerations of large language models or something you could recommend from others, she asked, referring to a buzzy kind of artificial intelligence software trained on text from an enormous number of web pages. The question may sound unassuming, but it touched on something central to the future of Google's foundational product, search. This kind of AI has become increasingly capable and popular in the last couple of years, driven largely by language models from Google and research lab OpenAI. Such AI can generate text mimicking everything from news articles and recipes to poetry, and has quickly become key to Google search. Okay, so Gebru discovered that AI recognizes faces, and this leads to certain assumptions, which are, yeah, they're too problematic, too problematic. So this woman who had a dream job, what this woman is actually good at is an interesting question. And whether she created anything of value for Google, I rather doubt. She managed to get herself fired or forced to resign from Google because basically she declared war on her own company, accusing it of being racist. This led to a Twitter war where people who were attacking others are racist claimed victim status. I was looking at one of these stories. I was reminded of this because this fellow, Alex Hanna, who still works at Google, said the company conducted interviews with various AI ethics team members. They were frankly interrogation sessions, she said. There is a picture of Alex Hanna here, and even if I could make it available to you, I don't know that I would. Okay? I don't know that I would because it is too frightening. Anyway, Dr. Alex Hanna, and let's see how Dr. Alex describes whatever it is this person is. Sociologist, ethical AI at Google, lecturer at Berkeley School, roller derby athlete, announcer, Bay Area Derby. There's some foreign flag here. Oh, the flag of Egypt. And what is this? She, her. Okay. Oh, and this person is living on unceded Ohlone land in Oakland. Yes, another one of these people who come from halfway around the world and lecture us that we're living on stolen land. So yesterday, this person, Dr. Alex, tweeted, gays this year take the don't participate in your company's pride propaganda challenge. Even better, honor Sylvia and Marshall correctly by throwing a brick through your company's window. So apparently someone who has a senior position at Google is recommending that people throw bricks through Google's windows. And I guess Google has been so, well, traumatized is the word of the year, along with reckoning. No, reckoning was last year's word. I think traumatized is the word of 2021. They don't dare fire this person who is advocating throwing a brick through their window. And we hear so much about white privilege. Yikes, I don't want to look at that picture again. But let's see. Let's move on to Canada. This is from Tyler Dawson of the National Post. A woman has filed a $1.25 million lawsuit against the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, alleging that while she was a scholarship student, she was sexually harassed by her mentor, and the foundation then pressured her to sign a non-disclosure agreement to keep it quiet. Oh, okay. So did they give her money based on her promise of silence? Now that she has broken her promise of silence, are they going to get their money back? Sherry Smiley, 38, is a member of the, I can't possibly pronounce this, made-up Indian tribe nation in British Columbia and the Dene Nation. She received a scholarship to the foundation in 2016 when she was in the second year of a PhD program at Concordia University in Montreal. Well, it's now 5 years later, and she is still a PhD student at Concordia University in Montreal. She alleges that she was sexually harassed by her mentor, Stephen Kakfwi, the former premier of the Northwest Territories, and the foundation tried to get her to sign an NDA. They told her that it would be bad for her if this got out and Kakfwi could sue her, and that the foundation could be accused of racism by Kakfwi, the lawsuit says. They attempted to minimize the sexual harassment, telling her it was just a cultural misunderstanding. The lawsuit is directed solely at the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. It does not name Kakfwi as a defendant, nor does it name as defendants the various members of the foundation with whom Smiley interacted over the course of 2018, 2019, and 2020. Okay. Intersectionality a go-go. So here we have an Indian woman who alleges that she was sexually harassed by an Inuit man. But apparently it's not his fault because he's not being sued. The Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation is being sued. So I guess that it is, as always, the fault of white people. In early June 2018, Smiley traveled to St. John's for the Foundation's Summer Institute, the lawsuit says, where she met Kakfwi, who would serve as her mentor. Mentorship is part of the Foundation's programming for its scholarship recipients. The lawsuit said the two had dinner together at a restaurant. The dinner was unusual in that Kakfwi spent the entire evening talking about himself and did not ask the plaintiff about her research or her areas of academic interest. She has a Master of Fine Arts degree. It also claims Kakfwi invited Smiley to visit him at his home in Yellowknife, which made the plaintiff uncomfortable. The lawsuit says that the two took a taxi to the Sheraton Hotel, where late at night in the hotel lobby, as they were saying their goodbyes, Kakfwi suddenly moved his body extremely close to the plaintiff and grabbed her upper arm close to her breast and squeezed it. He proceeded to hold on to her upper arm for an extended period, rubbing and massaging it. The plaintiff panicked and eventually pulled her body away from him, the lawsuit says. 2 days later, there was a session with speakers and mentors, and the discussion of Me Too came up. The lawsuit alleges that Kakfwi said he had been accused of sexual harassment and called the accuser a liar. The plaintiff and other attendees were extremely disturbed by this comment. Well, what do we know about this Sherry Smiley woman? Well, she's a PhD student at the age of 38. In 2014, the Nora and Ted Sterling Prize in Support of Controversy Award was presented to Sherry Smiley, MFA. Smiley is an artist, Indigenous feminist activist, and prostitution abolitionist, a frontline anti-violence worker, and accomplished public speaker on sexualized colonial violence against Indigenous women and girls. Well, she's alleging sexual violence against her, an Indian woman, by an Inuit, but I guess this is all the fault of colonialism. So this woman was, the establishment of Canada was essentially saying, what do you want? We'll give it to you. How can we honor you? She has her own web page, with quotations from Audre Lorde. There's a surprise. Philippa Ryan, I've never heard of that, people. From Pippi Longstocking. Okay, Maya Angelou. Wow, we're ticking a lot of boxes here. And she says that, I currently like this. I work on very serious and painful issues on a daily basis, so I find serious and non-serious fun whenever I can. It has taken me a very long time to gather most parts of myself together. It has also taken a very long time to do so without debilitating fear. I'm currently PhDing at Concordia University in Montreal, and I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about that. I bet she does. There are numerous photographs of her on her website, and this reveals that I would say somewhere between 40 to 50% of her body is covered with tattoos. The Canadian elite has been inviting Indigenous people into their ranks for some time now. And typically this ends with trouble, with recriminations, with "you have treated me badly." When I was speaking about Dr. Alex Hannix, I was struck by the fact that America seems to break a lot of immigrants. You see so many of them, highly disproportionate number of them are sexual freaks of one sort or another. And perhaps it would have been better for them if they had stayed home. Because, I don't know, American culture or what passes for American culture today, is a universal solvent. And all of the, I don't know, traditional values that one brings to America and Canada for that reason they're quickly dissolved. But here we have this woman, Cherry Smiley, and despite her name, what is she selling? Ask me about my pain. Are you scary, violent, mean? This is a question on her website. I usually don't get this question directly, but I do know that individuals and organizations, especially in academic and activist circles, make these kinds of statements about me. You want to give us some quotations? I'm direct and unafraid to share my political analyses on issues that matter to women and girls. I treat everyone with respect in these matters, but I'm not responsible if someone's feelings get hurt by political disagreements. Indigenous women have had long histories of being vilified as savage and violent when we don't get in line or when we don't say the things we're supposed to or expected to say. Perhaps some self-reflection about this is needed. We're not going to get any self-reflection from Cherry Smiley and her ilk. That's too much to ask for. Not all that long ago, we were being informed by the experts that there was a population crisis. Too many people. And soon we'd all be beating each other to death to kill dead rats found on the street. Now it's all turned around. According to a story, May 22nd in the New York Times by Damien Cave, Emma Bubala, and Choi Sang-hun, all over the world, countries are confronting population stagnation and a fertility bust, a dizzying reversal unmatched in recorded history that will make first birthday parties a rarer sight than funerals and empty homes a common eyesore. Maternity wards are already shutting down in Italy. Ghost cities are appearing in northeastern China. Now, actually, China built those ghost cities. They built cities, for 1 million people, and there were no people there. Universities in South Korea can't find enough students, and in Germany, hundreds of thousands of properties have been razed with the land turned into parks. What, not enough people living up in apartments in Germany? Like an avalanche, the demographic forces pushing toward more deaths than births seems to be expanding and accelerating, though some countries continue to see their populations grow, especially in Africa. Fertility rates are falling nearly everywhere else. Demographers now predict that by the latter half of the century, or possibly earlier, the global population will enter a sustained decline for the first time. A planet with fewer people could ease pressure on resources, slow the destructive impact of climate change, ho-ho, and reduce household burdens for women. Yes, here we go. Children disappearing, women hardest hit. But the census announcements this month from China and the United States, which showed the slowest rates of population growth in decades for both countries, also point to hard-to-fathom adjustments. How about scale? How about a world that has become meaningless, impossible to understand, and often literally insane? That might have something to do with people not having children anymore. How about the constant propaganda for decades that people who have children are selfish and wicked because we don't have the resources? No, you shouldn't have children in North America. We can import children from other countries. There's another aspect there. This belief that people are no longer in control of their civilizations, that they have been attacked by foreign or globalist forces. That might have something to do with it. And we find out that this apparently now, it was a commonplace for decades that the more education a woman had, the fewer children she had. Apparently, this has reversed somewhat, although I don't think that these women with PhDs are having very many children, even though apparently they can afford it. So there has been a lot of reporting and opinion mongering on this subject. Fred Watson Jr. writes at the American Sun, fertility is a cultural thing. The baby bust is here. There are news articles that comment on the lower fertility rate in not just Europe and Japan, but in America and also South Korea, which has the lowest replacement rate in the developed world. Fertility is now around 1.6 for the United States. It's the major social problem that progressives do not think has a government solution. First, the left would need to admit it is a problem since fewer humans mean less carbon. There is no need to address it except to feed the economy and social security. In their pre-approved messaging downloaded into their minds from the media, we'll just use immigration to fix our social welfare Rube Goldberg schemes. This is another one of those problems that points to the cultural rot of the modern West. I agree with all of the ideas that others point out, but there is a region spared most of this pain that has seen declining TFRs, New England. Check the statistics for each state. New England's 6 states are at the bottom 6 for states in America. Regional total fertility replacement is most likely 1.4, which is on a par with Japan, Italy, and Germany. These states avoided the immigration flood of the Southwest. These states are overwhelmingly white. So the argument from some that it has to do with race compositional change falls flat. Well, yeah, okay. There are the statistics on the ground, but then again, there's what you see on TV and the media. And if you watch television commercials from the United States and from Canada, you'll get the impression that whites are about 1/3 of the population. The problem is cultural. The left is in a death drive, and these states are very ideologically left. Maine, too, went for Trump by a hair, but the rest of New England is deep blue. This is what secular states with decayed civic institutions result in. This is when atomization sets in, and few have good connection, not just to the past, but even to their own families and intermediate communities. And again, evidence of that is the fact that Sarah Palin has a fine name, but of course she would never think about giving her own children, names like Sarah or Daniel, because that would be old-fashioned and not very creative. As I say, it is a rejection of historic community. Hedonism pushes fertility down, and that is tied to the old Pied Piper of if God ain't real, neither is the devil, so live it up. Do Disney people have children? Has that been studied yet? The chase for maintaining teenage interest continues in an extended adolescence. Travel becomes a substitute for fulfillment. Cruise any social media outlet for the single white woman meeting shamans and mystics in South America for a new experience in their lives. This is not all of it, but very few problems are single variable. Well, yes. People who willfully choose not to have children, they become rankled when they're accused of being selfish. Well, that is the very definition of selfishness. So one sees there just a little hint that they understand that what they are doing is unnatural. The article continues, Senator Josh Hawley has pushed a pro-natalist message consistently since arriving in D.C. He talks about policies to make building a family easier. Europe has these policies. They do not have replacement level fertility. It is more than monetary planning. It will take a reorientation of status to elevate the stay-at-home mom to mom and the mom who works to working mom. That was once how we described the maternal split, but now a mom is assumed to work while a stay-at-home mom is rarer and gets the alternative phrasing. Roland Hutford's excellent book on Sweden, The New Totalitarians, which was published as long ago as 1970, he describes in that book that the Swedish government and, working with the academia and industry, because Sweden is kind of corporatist in that way, they decided that not enough women were working. So they did a little language trick. They had a word in Swedish which was equivalent to, housewife. And then they introduced a new word which was shoved down everyone's throat, the woman who stays at home, i.e. selfish and irresponsible. Our culture would need to have steady messaging of the value and joy in having children. This would involve Hollywood content, advertising, and even late-night television promotion. If television can depress fertility in Brazil, it can raise it in America. The American people can be psyoped into fearing a virus that kills 0.3% of the population. With enough steady messaging, we can get them to have a child or have one more kid. Senator Hawley's measures are a nice suite of policies, but the battle is far deeper and broader than anyone wants to tackle. Desire is mimetic. There is a natural desire for kids latent in even the most hardened bachelor or girl boss, but cultural messaging is heavily anti-natalist. The mass cultural messaging must consistently message having children as a status boost. Children should be considered a positive addition to a complete life in all cultural content, not a burden, but a blessing. That we have to consider a message to bring forth new life is an indictment of our culture, but a harsh truth about our fallen nature. Well, consider the Friends reboot. The show was ridiculous when it was on the air. Why are all these people hanging out in a coffee shop all day long? Don't they have personal lives broader than hooking up? Now they're all in their 50s, and we're all going to ooh and ah to these people acting as if, they're in their late teens or early 20s. Yes. Remember the halcyon days of Friends, when the life without consequences, but was also not poor, was taken for granted? It's funny how nostalgia works, isn't it? And here is another article on a similar question. It's from The Tablet. It's by Michael Lind, who is a very interesting thinker. It's called Against Families, Why Progressives Oppose Child Care Choice. On May the 7th, Elizabeth Bruning wrote an innocuous Mother's Day column in the New York Times celebrating the joys of family and the unexpected virtues of having children at an early age. Bruning became a mother in her mid-20s. In response, Twitter was aflame for days as young feminist progressives and social media trolls excoriated her as a racist, sexist oppressor of women. She was skewered for using her privileged position to promote natalist propaganda and was pilloried for her reactionary pro-family values. Bruning signaled her support for federal subsidies to allow young mothers to stay at home without working if they choose to, which should be an uncontroversial opinion. Among American families with children, diversity in the choice of childcare options is the norm. According to Pew, in 2019, only 55% of mothers with children under 18 worked full-time. 55%. That's horrifying. Higher than the 34% who did so in 1971, but still only slightly more than half. Another 17% were employed part-time, while 28% of mothers with children under 18 were stay-at-home moms. Majorities of mothers who work full-time and part-time think their choices are best for them. Among at-home parental caregivers, only 25% said they would prefer full-time work, and only 35% would rather work part-time, according to Pew. In the light of the expressed preferences of American adults, you might think that the Biden administration and the Democratic majority in Congress would propose flexible family subsidies like Canada's child benefit, which Canadian families can spend either on a parental caregiver at home or an institutional child care. Well, here's an interesting thing about Canada's much lauded child benefit, which a few people mention. Children are no longer tax deductible in my country. Think about that. With the exception of a universal expanded child tax credit, all of the provisions in the American Families Plan, paid leave, universal preschool for 3- and 4-year-old children, capping the amount of income spent on childcare outside the home, the expansion of the earned income tax credit, and the child independent care tax credit are intended to help full-time or part-time working parents who therefore must turn over their children during work hours to paid public, private, or nonprofit functionaries for supervision. In other words, billions for institutional care, but not a penny for parental child care at home. I should mention something about Canada. Of course, they have $5 a day daycare in Quebec, which is paid for by British Columbia and Alberta. But the Canadian government is moving towards a governmental daycare. And look, this isn't an accident. It isn't an accident. The progressives know that if children are raised by their parents, particularly by their mothers, they are likely to imbibe certain atavistic values, which will take many years of education to eliminate. Furthermore, there's a lot of people on the right, a lot of feminists who consider themselves to be right-wing, who agree that mothers who look after their children in lieu of working are selfish, traitors to the gross domestic product. Why is it, Lind writes, that most progressives who ardently defend choice when it comes to abortion oppose choice when it comes to different models of childcare? Democratic Party coalition politics provides a part of the answer. The two public school teachers unions, the National Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers, regularly give almost half of their campaign contributions to Democratic candidates, including Joe Biden, who received the lion's share of their contributions in the 2020 election cycle. Removing childcare from the home and thereby expanding the public school monopoly to children younger than school age translates into more jobs and money for unionized public school teachers, and thus more donations to the Democratic Party, taken indirectly out of the pockets of American taxpayers. In addition, employer lobbies argue constantly for expanding the share of female labor force participation. Translation: more mothers should be separated from their young children by work during the day. Well, there have been studies done on the effect of Quebec's $5 daycare and what they call the outcomes of children who have been raised in these daycares. Guess what? They're not good. They're not good. Lind has been a very valuable critic of what Edward Luttwak dubbed turbo capitalism. He continues in this vein. Like teachers' unions, business lobbies stand to profit from the outsourcing of childcare from the home. How? Consider that there are two ways to expand output. The hard way is to increase labor productivity per worker by innovative labor-saving technologies or innovative processes. The easy and lazy way to boost output and profit is to use old technologies and add workers. Better yet, when both parents work, many activities in addition to childcare, including cooking and cleaning, must be performed by firms outside the home for money. Busy parents must drop off their children, drop off their laundry, and pick up fast food for the family. That means more money for daycare operators, cleaners, and fast food chains. Yes, if something is not monetized, if something is not transactional, both the left and the establishment right tell us that it is worthless. When a mother spends time sitting on the floor, playing with blocks or whatever with her children, how does that grow the GDP? Well, it doesn't, does it? And people like Paul Ryan, it's all worship of mammon. How can we raise the GDP? These people, they worship the GDP as a golden calf. According to Lind, the Biden administration goes so far as to claim that the United States suffers from a daycare gap in the new Cold War competition with China. Quote, together these plans reinvest in the future of the American economy and American workers, and it will help us outcompete China and other countries in the world. Yes, I'm reminded of Dorothy Day, the Catholic activist, and one of the fellows who worked with him, with her, Peter Maturin, I think his name was. He said that children were not created to be slaves of the managerial state, but apparently they are. And how was it that for millennia, the children were raised by their parents, primarily by their mothers? Well, they were wrong. They were stupid. Lind marvels stay-at-home moms lower U.S. GDP by lowering female workforce participation. Parental caregivers are the fifth column of Chinese communists who want to undermine the U.S. economy. Sound the alarm. Citizens, if you see any parents with small children at home between the hours of 8 and 5 in your neighborhood, report them to the authorities immediately. I think this is there's practical value here in the kind of argumentation Lynn makes. Is if you're considering voting for a politician at any level, ask that person or find out what their views on mothers raising their own children are. If they are against this, if they seek policies which are going to make it difficult or impossible for mothers to do this, well, don't vote for them. Don't give them any money, and make it clear to them that they are the enemies of civilization. And let's have a look at the chat. Texas Feral Hog says people just need to develop the technology for permanent inhabitation of space. Out in space, people can have as big families as they want because there's plenty of space out in space. Okay, so yes, people are talking seriously about what Elon Musk or Elon Musk's wife, is she his wife, who gave the stupidest name I've ever heard to their child, that she intends to go to Mars. If she goes to Mars, assuming that she survives the journey, she is going to die there. What kind of habitation could possibly exist in Mars? What could they take with them? It seems a very elaborate suicide plot to me. Aslan says, reminds me of an old Turkish joke. A kid asks his father, babe, how did I come to be born? Father says, oh, I had sex with your mother. Kid says, what? Father says, oh, forget it. Okay, all right. I had twins this morning after my coffee, says Roulette Cracked. Daycare is national security. Close the daycare gap, says DB Cooper. Metal Mike says Karl Marx considered the nuclear family to be an evil instrument of capitalism. Yes, Herbert Marcuse developed this even further, calling for the right to be destroyed through sexual perversion. And of course, the right, or conservative movement, Conservatism Inc., is all in favor of sexual perversion because it's all about choice. And choice, not truth or virtue, is now the highest value. Roulette Crack says daycare enables females to become fully fledged window lickers. Okay. Angela Davis was a Marcuse groupie, says Aslan. Roulette Crack says, I have a theory that we are in a 40-year hangover, which started on January 1st, 2000. If you have an all-day drinking session, you lose a day. Humanity had a 40-year drinking session. Okay. Nature is not teleological, says Texas Feral Hog. I don't know what that means exactly. Someone is talking about Kamala. Steve, she's so unpopular, she's almost certainly going to be completely dependent on who's ever handling Biden. Okay. Oh, we're talking about films now? Okay, which film is that? Mustang Palin, Champ Palin, Grug Palin, says DB Cooper. Hello to Professor Paul. Okay. Oh, okay, we're talking about the movie before the movie. We'll get there in about half an hour. And I'll be talking about Friends of Eddie Coyle. And, okay. It is now, such as the anti-natalist propaganda now, that childbirth, natural childbirth, is now seen as, rather like in Brave New World, as being disgusting and fantastic. So, surrogates. Oh, this child was born via a surrogate. Whose child is it then? The idea of the rich hiring poor women's wombs, that somehow this isn't seen as exploitation? Curious, because it's the rich doing it. That's why we have this phenomenon of famous people, including Beyonce and Megan Mertz, who have supposedly given birth to children. Is there any evidence that they have actually given birth to children? So we've been hearing about the artificial womb for a long time. And we keep getting these stories. The artificial womb is getting closer. Of course, one of the reasons why mothers are particularly attached to their children is because they spend 9 months inside their body. But we can't have that anymore, because childbirth, pregnancy induces all manner of hormonal changes and physical deterioration, if you will, to women's bodies. And if, women's purpose is to, is for sexual intercourse, then pregnancy becomes, problematic. Here is a grotesque and disgusting story from Maria Cheng of the Associated Press. New guidelines released Wednesday remove a decades-old barrier to stem cell research, recommending that researchers be allowed to grow human embryos longer under limited conditions. The 14-day rule, an international ethical standard that limits laboratory studies of human embryos, has been in place for decades and has been written into law in countries including Britain and Australia. Scientists previously have been required to destroy, or as a human being would say, kill, human embryos grown in a lab before they reach 14 days. Let's let scientists do whatever they want, because it always leads to good things, like nuclear weapons and gain of function research. Oh, okay. It's always time to beat up on reporters, particularly from the New York Times. This is from Thomas Lifson at American Thinker. Twitter may have devolved into a left-wing propaganda organ, but it still has value as a medium for leftists to discredit themselves with hasty expressions of their real thoughts and feelings. Particularly for journalists accustomed to relying on editors to save themselves from revealing too much, the speed with which their unfiltered thoughts can be broadcast to the world is dangerous. The latest example comes from the New York Times reporter assigned to cover what may be the hottest story of our era, the COVID virus that turned the world upside down and killed millions. Apurva Mandavili, and I checked her Wikipedia page, and it doesn't say where she was born, at first seems to have thought that just as the agitprop media were being forced to admit that it isn't a crazy conspiracy theory to suspect that COVID emerged from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, it was time to discredit such ideas as racist, at least in origin. And Apurva tweeted yesterday, "Someday we will stop talking about the lab leak theory and maybe even admit its racist roots. But alas, that day is not here yet." That tweet has now been deleted. And Stephen Miller suggested in a tweet, someone got a phone call. Alex Berenson said, so Apurva, one of the lead New York Times reporters covering COVID, just tweeted she believes the lab leak theory is racist. She has since deleted the tweet. How can the Times let her cover any aspect of COVID going forward? Beckett Adams tweeted, New York Times COVID-19 reporter instills perfect confidence in the paper's ability to actually report the issue. He followed up with, in hindsight, maybe it wasn't the smartest idea for the Times to shit-can the 45-year veteran science and public health reporter because some snot-nosed high schoolers didn't like his attitude. And furthermore, I think my favorite thing about dismissing the lab theory as racist is that it asks us instead to believe the virus started in a filthy Chinese wet market filled with bats and pangolin stomachs, or whatever. And, Chris Cuomo, who still has a job for some reason. This is according to Sarah Ellison at Jeremy Barr at the Washington Post. As they waited for the news to break last week, Chris Cuomo, or Fredo, as we know him as, struck an uncharacteristically deferential tone with his boss. I'll do whatever you think I should do, the combative CNN host told the network's president, Jeff Zucker, just before the anticipated publication of a story that would expose him for having crossed one of journalism's ethical lines. As the Washington Post reported Thursday, Cuomo participated in the official strategy sessions with political advisors guiding his brother, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, on how to respond to sexual harassment allegations. Zucker had tolerated other missteps by his increasingly controversial primetime star, but this time he informed Cuomo that he had crossed a line, and he urged him to go on TV to explain himself. Crossing a line. Unlike, say, getting together with your brother regularly on your CNN show to deliver what are pretty much unpaid campaign commercials for Governor Death, and so amusing talk of Mom loved me best. No, Mom loved you best. That's what we call news these days. Okay, and here's the line from the CBC. Lauren Pelly, yes, provinces are preparing to reopen, but it's not time to ditch your mask just yet. Experts say. Whew. Man, I just don't know what I'd do without having to wear a mask every day. That means we can't abandon all the measures that we put in place, says Dr. Stephanie Smith. That means maintaining public health precautions such as mask wearing, physical distancing, and basic hand hygiene, and in the case of some workplaces, upgrading their ventilation during this transition period back to normal life, since many Canadians remain vulnerable and unvaccinated. We have to recognize that although our case numbers are going down, there is still some COVID circulating in the community, Smith said. So she's one of those zero COVID maniacs. If they're waiting for zero COVID, then the lockdown terror will last forever. This is from Anthony Murdoch at LifeSite. Canadian doctor removed from hospital duty after speaking out about COVID vaccine side effects. Dr. Charles Hoff said he was suspended for the crime of causing vaccine hesitancy for speaking out about my vaccine-injured patients. Got to keep stum about that. Oh, and here's a scary story from the Washington Post. Isaac Stanley Becker. The Americans lodging complaints against coronavirus vaccine mandates are a diverse lot. A sheriff's deputy in North Carolina, nursing home employees in Wisconsin, and students at the largest university in New Jersey. But their resistance is woven together by a common thread, the involvement of a law firm closely tied to the anti-vaccine movement. Attorneys from Siri and Glimstad, a New York firm that has done millions of dollars of legal work for one of the nation's foremost anti-vaccination groups, are co-counsel in a case against the Durham County Sheriff's Office. They've sent warning letters to officials in Rock County, Wisconsin, as well as to the president of Rutgers University and other schools. The legal salvo show that a groundswell against compulsory immunization is being coordinated, at least in part, from a law office on Park Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. And they offer a window into a wide-ranging and well-resourced effort to contest vaccine requirements in workplaces and other settings critical to the country's reopening, a dispute with sweeping implications for public health, state authority, and individual rights. See what the planted axiom here is? These anti-vaccine yahoos have lawyered up. They're actually running a coordinated campaign to protect their interests. They're not allowed to do that. Only the progressives are allowed to do that. And here's the latest news from Australia. Australians of course, used to be thought of as a tough lot, and now Australians are among the most sissified people on earth. I mean, they're really giving Canada a run for their money. This is from Alana Mazzoni in the Daily Mail. Panicked Melburnians are fleeing Victoria in droves ahead of an imminent new lockdown during the state's growing COVID outbreak. But there are fears the cluster, which has now climbed to 26 cases. I wanted to bash my head there repeatedly, but then I realized that one, it hurts and it's not good for my brain. 26 cases in a state with 9 million people in it. Let's not fight against the insane government of the state of Victoria. We'll just flee. We'll just flee because there's nothing we can do. because the experts have decided that 26 cases in a state with 9 million people means everything needs to be shut down. Here's a story again from LifeSite, and it's from John Henry Weston, the editor. Catholic bishops showed a lack of faith during COVID lockdowns. Phil Lawler's latest book explores the cowardly COVID responses by the Catholic Church's shepherds. I have interviewed Philip Lawler several times. He's a highly intelligent and thoughtful man, described as author and founder of Catholic World News. He has a new book, Lawler does, called Contagious Faith, why the Church must spread hope, not fear, in a pandemic. And he describes the various responses to COVID-19 taken by the Church's shepherds as the health first heresy. This heresy is the idea that your physical health is more important than your spiritual health, which totally contradicts Church doctrine. He also says that the suspension of public masses was terribly wrong, and that it displays how a true sense of faith has been lost by so many Catholics, but especially the clergy. Lawler points out that every person takes risks in life, and that the risks associated with the coronavirus could never justify the disproportionate reaction of shutting down churches to the public. Well, big question, which has been asked for, about a year now, is given that churches, well, certainly where I live, throughout Canada, of the United States, Catholic churches I'm talking about, well, everywhere, been effectively shut down for a year. How many people are going to come back if they ever open up again? Well, many fewer people are going to return. But it seems to me that the heretics who are in the Catholic Church now are going to be well pleased with this development. There was a Jesuit called Karl Rahner. He was an exceedingly influential theologian of the 20th century, and he argued for the virtues of the little flock. See, circa 1960, before the Second Vatican Council started 2 years earlier, Catholic churches were being built in great numbers all across North America. Hang on a second here. Yes, churches. Many churches were built in the 1960s because the number of congregants was increasing greatly. Well, the Second Vatican Council put paid to that, and the number of people who attend a church on Sundays and other holy days of obligation continues to plummet. But people who are influenced by Rahner thinks that this is a good thing. And why? Too many of the great unwashed were members of the Catholic Church. These people weren't intellectuals. They weren't reading papal encyclicals. They weren't constantly talking about gossip from Rome. And Rahner and his ilk did not want these people in what they saw as their club. Let's go briefly to lockdown skeptics. Why are the teaching unions such lockdown skeptics? Asked Toby Young. That's an easy question to answer. Because they want a 12-month paid vacation. I mean, come on. You get paid not to work. Sounds good, right? Of course, with teachers in many jurisdictions having been, off the job for 12 months or more, radical thinkers might begin to think, if the world didn't come to an end without this enormous number of highly paid so-called public servants, why do we need so many? We could easily get by with half as many. By the way, if anyone tells you, that more money needs to be spent on education or need to hire more teachers in order to get class sizes down, there is no empirical evidence that demonstrates that smaller class sizes result in better educational outcomes. The definitive research on that has been done by Professor Richard Vedder. His own research indicates that a class size of 35 is probably optimal, which sounds counterintuitive, but when you think about it a little, it isn't. Because in a class size of 35, which is about the size that I grew up with, discipline is absolutely essential. Absolutely essential. We may need to wait before pushing ahead with unlocking, says Boris Johnson. Hurry up and wait. That has been his policy right from the very beginning. Facebook condemned for trying to ingratiate itself with China by censoring of lab leak theory. It's like we're constantly in a crisis. GPs face millions of appointments due to lockdown backlog. Why haven't we heard Dominic Cummings' shocking revelations about the chaos in Downing Street until now? Was it because of Ofcom's 1984-style diktat that muzzled the broadcast media? Ofcom is the regulatory agency for a British television. COVID lab leak theory must be properly investigated if we are to avoid another pandemic, says Matt Ridley. Yeah, investigation. The more you know, right? Data is a good thing, supposedly. Isn't that what science teaches us? And we are all in favor of science. And let's go to Alex Berenson. What does he have to say? Okay. Indian variant now dominant in UK, says Professor Neil Ferguson, as June 21 easing in the balance. Yes, Professor Doom, as he is known, the famed modeler, every prediction from him has been grotesquely wrong. But somehow he still has a job. Somehow he's still a top advisor to Britain's government. Berenson responds, is he still talking? Just to be clear, COVID deaths have dropped 99% in Britain since late January. Not good enough for Professor Pecker, apparently. Can't he go back into getting his knickers in a twist about swine flu or something? Swine flu is a reference to one of the most notorious bad modeling results that Ferguson came up with here. According to Genevieve Campbell, the AAP has put out a statement saying kids ages 2 to 11 should distance and wear masks until they're fully vaccinated. Children will be the group with the most restrictive, longest-lasting NPIs, despite being the least at risk and least likely to transmit. Impossible to overstate the absurdity here, comments Alex Berenson. AAP is the American Academy of Pediatrics. They're supposed to be looking out for kids. Oh, Apurva, previously mentioned, has deleted her Twitter account. Looks like somebody couldn't stand the heat. Berenson comments, too bad. Would have been better if she'd stayed on Twitter and deleted her insane idea that the lab leak theory is somehow racist. Here's a story from CBS Los Angeles. Snitches get rewards. Garcetti issues new rules for construction sites, encourages community to report safer at home violators. Presented without comment, Berenson says. And, yeah, I want to talk about discrimination against white people, particularly white males. This is from revolver.news. It is increasingly obvious to all Americans, even congressional Republicans, that America's governing elites openly spout racist propaganda against white people. Public schools push critical race theory while abandoning advanced math. Even in high-stakes institutions like the U.S. military and its key contractors, fairness and merit are being tossed in favor of hysterical denunciations of phantom white supremacy. This is about more than rhetoric and propaganda. The Biden administration is sending the signal in the clear for anybody who wants to notice it. America has implemented an anti-white race and anti-male sex-based caste system where the hated straight white men are firmly at the bottom and the courts are ready to sustain it. In the most recent $1.9 trillion round of coronavirus stimulus, Congress set aside $28.6 billion for a restaurant revitalization program to bolster the industry hit hardest by a year of economically suicidal lockdowns. But instead of fairly distributing the money based on need or on a first-come, first-served basis, The program was set up with rigid identity-based restrictions. For the first 3 weeks, only women, veterans, or socially or economically disadvantaged individuals are eligible for funds. Well, it seems to me that if your restaurant, was knocked out of the box or struggling to survive because of COVID-19 lockdowns, wouldn't that prima facie make you an economically disadvantaged individual? And naturally, now that the program is open to white men, all the money is already gone. Too bad. Better luck next time. And the initial reference was to a shocking article in City Journal. Well, shocking in one sense, but also perfectly banal in another, from Christopher Rufo, the woke industrial complex. Last year, Lockheed Martin Corporation, the nation's largest defense contractor, sent white male executives to a 3-day diversity training program aimed at deconstructing their white male culture and encouraging them to atone for their white male privilege, according to documents I have obtained. The program, hosted on Zoom for a cohort of 13 Lockheed employees, was led by the diversity consulting firm White Men as Full Diversity Partners, which specializes in helping white males awaken together. The Lockheed employees, all senior leaders in the company, included Aaron Huckabee, Director of Global Supply Chain Operations, retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel David Starr, Director of the Hercules C-130 Military Transport Program, retired Air Force Lieutenant General Bruce Litchfield, Vice President of Sustainment Operations, and Glenn Woods, Vice President of Production for the Air Force's $1.7 trillion F-35 fighter jet program. Lockheed Martin did not return request for comment. At the beginning of the program, the diversity trainers led a free association exercise asking the Lockheed employees to list connotations for the term white men. The trainers wrote down old, racist, privileged, anti-women, angry, Aryan nation, KKK, founding fathers, guns, guilty, and can't jump. Yeah, I know it's a reference to a movie. According to the participants, these perceptions have led to assumptions about white men and diversity, with many employees believing that white men don't care about diversity, have a classical perspective on history and colonialism, and don't want to give away our power. And we get the typical things from these statements that apparently, like a can-do attitude and looking at the world empirically. Well, these are evidence of white supremacy and must be put behind us. I don't know how one builds, say, military equipment without a commitment to empirical knowledge, but perhaps they'll find a way. Perhaps we'll be told that the spears are better weapons than, say, F-35s. Back to Schrodinger's cat. This is from, the K file. Andrew Kaczynski and M. Steck. M, presumably her name is Emma, but like Jen, not Jennifer Psaki, she wants to go with this ugly M instead of Emma, which is a lovely name. I wonder why women do that. Trump appointee on West Point board spreads conspiracy that Biden is replacing white people of European ancestry. Yeah, it's not a conspiracy. It is a fact. How? It's just, the percentage of white people in the United States, which was, 90%, as high as 1960, is now down to 60% and continues to falling. That was just an accident. No, completely an accident. These people fell from the sky into America. A grand plan, said our retired Army Colonel Douglas McGregor. He also attacked women serving in the military in combat roles. My word. Yes, there's no question about it, he said. Their idea of control is to bring in as many people as they possibly can, as quickly as possible from anywhere in the world, frankly, but preferably from Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, and some portions of Asia, but not many. The idea is they have to bring in as many non-Europeans as possible in order to outnumber the numbers of Americans of European ancestry who live in the United States. That's what it's all about, and I don't think there is any point in questioning it. That is the policy. It is a deliberate policy to enact demographic change. Well, it's a conspiracy if you're against it, but it's something that is acclaimed if you are in favor of it, and it has been acclaimed. But going back 15, 20 years, the America of year X is not going to be majority white. Hooray! Because white Americans never accomplished anything. For instance, the formation of the United States of America and its transformation into the leading military and economic power on Earth. Let's see. White House spokesperson Andrew Bates condemned McGregor's recent remarks, telling CNN, "These hateful and grotesque sentiments are antithetical to the values and character of our nation and armed forces, whose standards, excellence, and professionalism are without comparison. There is absolutely no place in public service for racism, for denigrating the contributions of women in the military, or for religious bigotry." Religious bigotry? Where do they get that from? Where do they get that from? And I'm just going to mention this. Oh, yes. Of course, this story appears from Alex Tanzi and Bloomberg. Cities in the U.S. heartland have turned into hubs for immigration, a new study shows, helping in some cases to reverse generations of declining birth rates. Columbus, Ohio, and Des Moines, Iowa are among the metropolitan areas with the fastest growing foreign-born population, according to the Heartland Forward think tank, which focuses on the region's economic performance. In the past decade, they have attracted newcomers at a much faster pace than historical magnets of immigration like New York City or Los Angeles. See, if you are in favor of the Great Replacement, it's a good thing. It's all about diversity and growing the GDP. But if you're against it, it's a conspiracy theory, and it demonstrates that you are a white supremacist. This is a piece from a couple of months ago, which was from March, but it was just brought to my attention today. It's from the Brookings Institution, which used to be a seriously regarded think tank. Why the trope of Black-Asian conflict in the face of anti-Asian violence dismisses solidarity. Oh, dear. Yes, a recent survey shows that more than 3 out of 4 Asian Americans worry about experiencing hate crimes, harassment, and discrimination because of COVID-19. Among Chinese and Asian Indians, the figures are even higher at 84% and 80%, respectively. These findings may be unsurprising in light of shocking video footage of anti-Asian violence that has recently gone viral. Viewers of these videos witnessed perpetrators shoving elderly men and women to the ground, assaulting Asian American men and women in the face, and stabbing an Asian American in the back with an 8-inch knife. Okay. Since March of last year, there have been over 3,000 self-reported incidents of anti-Asian violence. Okay, so let's bury the lead here. Let's bury the lead. Oh, here we get to it. The trope of Black-Asian conflict. These senseless acts of anti-Asian violence have finally garnered the national attention they deserve, but they've also invoked anti-Black sentiment and reignited the trope of Black-Asian conflict. Because some of the videotape perpetrators appear to have been Black, some observers immediately reduced anti-Asian violence to Black-Asian conflict. This is not the first time that the trope has been weaponized. So Black people are attacking Asian people with weapons, but to notice this is weaponizing a trope. The trope failed to capture the reality of Black-Korean relations 3 decades ago. Oh, they were getting along so well, were they? And it fails to capture the reality of anti-Asian bias today. A recent study found that, in fact, well, actually, Christian nationalism is the strongest predictor of xenophobic views of COVID-19, and the effect of Christian nationalism is greater among white respondents compared to Black respondents. Moreover, Black Americans have also experienced high levels of racial discrimination since the pandemic began. Why don't you just make stuff up. Hence, not only does the frame, remember we were talking about framing yesterday? You're going to be hearing a lot of these words, frame and framing, of two minoritized groups. You see, they were minoritized. They weren't minorities, but they were minoritized, just like they were racialized. Groups in conflict ignore the role of white national populism. Yeah, that's really carrying the day in America, isn't it? But it also absolves the history and systems of inequality that positioned them there. Who wrote this, Tosh? Two women. One is called Jennifer Lee, and the other is called Tiffany Huang. Two Chinese women wrote this story. Yes, I'm looking at pictures of them, and they are... Jennifer Lee is the Julian Clarence Levi Professor of Social Sciences at Columbia University and past president of the Eastern Sociological Society. Tiffany Huang is a PhD candidate in the Department of Sociology at Columbia University. Well, screw them, okay? If these people can't even come to the defense of their own people against the predations of blacks and instead blame this on white, to hell with them. Just to hell with them. How can you have any sympathy with people as stupid and craven as that? I mean, it really beggars credulity that, yes, there was all this framing going on because people kept seeing videos of elderly Asian people being thumped or stabbed by young black men. And the first thing that comes to their minds is, of course, white people again. So let's switch to Theater Thursday. Our movie today is called The Friends of Eddie Coyle. It's directed by Peter Yates. Screenplay is by Paul Monash, and it is closely based, I have to say, on the 1970 novel by George Higgins. The movie came out in 1973, The Friends of Eddie Coyle. George Higgins, a fascinating fellow. He was a assistant U.S. district attorney who went into journalism and novel writing. He was quite successful at writing novels. I've read quite a few of them, and they're quite good. They are quite good. I should say that this film is available on Blu-ray from both the Criterion Collection and Masters of Cinema. Criterion Collection Blu-ray is Region A locked. Masters of Cinema is Region B locked. But of course, if you have an all regions player, which you can get for about $300, you don't have to worry about regions anymore. And if you buy a lot of Blu-rays, particularly those from foreign countries, often unavailable in the United States and Canada, you will end up saving money. The all regions player will more than pay for itself. The Criterion Blu-ray has a commentary from the director, Peter Yates. Masters of Cinema, which has it's got more stuff on it. It's got a 22-minute video appreciation by Glenn Kenny, whose book Made Men on Goodfellas I praised some weeks ago on the book club. And it has a long interview, 77 minutes appreciation of Peter Yates's career, which was hosted by Derek Malcolm of The Guardian. Both have booklets with essays in them. So it's kind of a toss-up. Well, let's look at the price here. $42.67 from Amazon for the Criterion version. The UK version, it's only £12. Again, that's a tremendous saving over the Criterion. Now, shipping, you're wondering about the shipping. I'll just say that if you're buying from out of the UK, you get 20% off because you don't have to pay the value added tax. Peter Yates. He started as an assistant director and worked on a number of hit films and famous films, including The Inn of the Sixth Happiness, Sons and Lovers, The Entertainer, and A Taste of Honey, The Guns of Navarone. He worked as a theater director. His first notable, yes, he worked on Patrick McGowan's The Saint and Danger Man as a director. His first feature was called Robbery in 1967, which is about the great train robbery of 1963, but certain things are changed in it. This got the attention of Hollywood. And of course, in 1968, Yates directed Bullet, which is a crime film. It's a rather glamorous crime film, I must say. Well, it's got Steve McQueen in it, driving his Mustang, and his girlfriend is Jacqueline Bisset. And he made The Hot Rock, a heist film in 1972. And it's a bad thing that happens to directors. You know, they get to a certain age and they're sidelined. But before he got sidelined, Yates directed in 1979 Breaking Away, which is one of my very favorite films, and which I highly recommend to you. It's a film about America which has been completely lost. And I praised this on Theater Thursday some weeks ago. I've seen his film The Dresser, which is about the theater, the English theater, and it is really quite good. His film Eleni, which stars John Malkovich, it's very, very anti-communist. And anti-communist films were not the done thing in America in the 1980s or at any time, actually. And the last theatrical feature Yates made was in 1998, and he made a TV film in 2000 and 2004. So The Friends of Eddie Coyle stars Robert Mitchum, who is, you've heard me say this sort of thing a lot, but he's the type of movie star that Hollywood doesn't make anymore. That is to say, a very manly man. Not a pretty boy by any means, but a powerful looking and acting man. Of course, Robert Mitchum starred in The Night of the Hunter, one of the greatest American films ever made, although it was directed by Charles Laughton, an Englishman. The film was a flop, but it is highly regarded today. And Robert Mitchum, of course, starred in Out of the Past, which is considered one of the greatest noir films. Friends of Eddie Coyle is a noir film, but it's a little different from the standard noir film, and I'll talk about that shortly. This film also stars Peter Boyle, who was a very unlikely movie star because of his looks. He was bald from an early age, and you wouldn't call him pretty or even handsome. He starred in this film called Joe, which was directed by John Avildsen, who later directed Rocky. And it's basically about a fellow who just hates hippies and is determined to, do something about it. And of course, you're supposed to hate him, but strangely enough, people warmed to Joe because most Americans hated hippies. You'll see Peter Boyle in Scorsese's Taxi Driver, where he plays a taxi driver who's called the Wizard. And later you will, he's also in Medium Cool, one of the hip movies of the 1960s. Diary of a Mad Housewife, ditto, and The Candidate. This guy was in a lot of critical favorites. He was in Young Frankenstein, and later he made a lot of money appearing on Everyone Loves Raymond, which is one of those TV sitcom staples where husbands must be punished. Apparently, husbands are the worst people in America, and that's what we had for years and years and years, is husbands being mocked by their wives, mocked by their children, being ground down because that's what they deserved. Richard Jordan is in this film. He died at the relatively early age at 1956. You might remember him as the National Security Advisor in The Hunt for Red October. He is quite good in that. And of course, going back to Logan's Run from 1976, there's always a kind of mysterious quality about Richard Jordan in his acting. He always seemed to give you the impression that he knew more than he was willing to say, which is quite an attractive characteristic in an actor. Stephen Keats has a huge role in this film. I mean, he could be seen as a co-star along with a Robert Mitchum. If you've seen Death Wish, you will remember him as the husband, the son-in-law of Charles Bronson, and his mother-in-law and his wife. Well, his mother-in-law is murdered and his wife is raped and goes insane. And understandably, he doesn't take it very well. So, the score is by Dave Grusin. Dave Grusin's a major figure in modern jazz, or jazz fusion, or Fusac, as some people call it. It seems that a lot of it's rather like Lalo Schifrin. I don't think that the score is as good as Lalo Schifrin's best efforts, but it is really of the time. You definitely say that about his score. Now, I said that this was a noir film, and of course it is. And what do you know about a noir film? Well, you know it's about people who are typically in a desperate situation. Often these people have been set up by others to take the fall for others' misdeeds. One of the things you typically get in a noir film is the idea of escape. In many noir films, you have people literally on the run. Well, they never make it out because it's a noir film. But there's the idea that there is somehow a better life waiting for them. And of course, their dreams have to be crushed. Typically in a noir film, there will be a Mr. Big, and you will learn a lot about sinister Mr. Big. There's no Mr. Big in The Friends of Eddie Coyle. Now, we're made aware that obviously there are people higher up in the food chain than Robert Mitchum and Peter Boyle. And we hear vaguely of orders that have come from them, but we never see them. And this is important because in a typical noir, one is led to believe, or there's an attempt to persuade one that it's the malign influence of these Mr. Bigs which lead our everyman protagonists into a life of crime. Well, no, there's no such a suggestion in this film. It's as if the people involved, Mitchum and Jordan and Keats, well, they were born to it. Also, femme fatale. Noirs typically have a femme fatale, who is a woman who leads a man into disaster. Well, there isn't one in this film. There is practically no female representation at all. We do get a bit of eye candy, or what the kids are calling fan service now. We are introduced to Alec Rocco's girlfriend, who is a gorgeous blonde with big breasts who doesn't wear a bra. She has no relevance to the plot whatsoever, and she's on screen for about 2 minutes. Alex Rocco, who of course played Mo Green in The Simpsons, and of course famously played Roger Myers Jr. On The Simpsons. This is a very good cast. Everyone is well cast. Well, they're all character actors except for Robert Mitchum, who had been a star for decades. This is, I mentioned this before, one of the advantages of casting character actors in your movie is that if you cast a leading man, well, the audience thinks they're not going to kill that guy. And typically they don't. Occasionally, you get shocks. I mean, one of the reasons why, of course, Hitchcock's Psycho was so shocking is they kill off Janet Leigh. They kill off Janet Leigh halfway through the movie, and nobody saw that coming. Why would you cast Janet Leigh as the star in your film and then kill her halfway through the movie? So, this is a 70s film, and in the 70s, they made films about people like Eddie Coyle. They don't do that anymore. They haven't done that for a long time because Eddie Coyle isn't, saving the universe or taking over the universe. He's not, bombing cities or planets or whatever. He doesn't fly. He doesn't wear spandex. There is nothing out of the ordinary about him whatsoever. And this is a 70s movie, so there is lots of location shooting. Lots and lots and lots. In Boston itself, the Boston Garden, we get to see number 4, Bobby Orr, playing. Now, this scene is pivotal to the film. We've got Peter Boyle and Robert Mitchum and Boyle's nephew, and they go to the gardens to watch Boston play Chicago. And there is really good footage of an actual NHL game. There's also a scene shot in Dedham and Cambridge, Milton, Quincy, Sharon, Somerville, Malden, and Weymouth. And you really get a sense of place from this movie. As I mentioned a couple of days ago, this movie is shot in Massachusetts in autumn, and you think, oh yes, the changing of the leaves, how pretty, etc., etc. This movie is not pretty at all. Perhaps they were just lucky, with the days that they shot, but it seems to be overcast. Every scene seems to be overcast, and one gets the impression of a world dying. And I suspected that perhaps this is a kind of extrinsic physical representation of the state of mind of the characters themselves, that they are ground down and they're incapable of appreciating the beauty of the natural world. So they don't see it. It doesn't exist for them. And Eddie Coyle is a small-time Irish gangster. And I guess the message of this film is that crime doesn't pay. Just true enough. Well, for some people. I mean, robbing banks, kidnapping people, that sort of thing, that's a bad bet. You will get caught, and you will spend a lot of time in prison. Oh, now, white-collar crime, that's what you want to get into. But you need, university degree from good university, family connections, help, Eddie Coyle sells guns. He's also done, various things for the Irish mafia in Boston. Now, Whitey Bulger, he got away with it for decades, but then it turned out that Whitey Bulger was an informant for the FBI, which is dramatized quite well in Scorsese's film, The Departed. Of course, Whitey Bulger eventually did end up in prison, in his 80s, and he was murdered the next day. Apparently, it's impossible for prison authorities in America to keep alive the most notorious prisoners, the most obvious ones at risk, such as Jeffrey Epstein and Whitey Bulger. And here's how Eddie Coyle describes himself. I'm getting old, you hear? I spent most of my life hanging around crummy joints with a bunch of punks drinking the beer, eating the hash and the hot dogs, and watching the other people go off to Florida while I'm sweating out how I'm going to pay the plumber. I done time and I stood up, but I can't take no more chances. Next time, it's going to be me going to Florida. Yeah, well, you know, the audience doesn't really think there's much chance of Eddie Coyle going to Florida, because it turns out that Eddie did a favor for someone else in the Irish Mafia. He drove a truck that was full of stolen goods. And he got caught. And he went up the river. But he didn't squeal on the person who gave him the job. And I'm not going to spoil that aspect of it. It's, on the one hand, it's rather shocking. On the other hand, it's, well, yeah, okay. That's how these people are. You know, no honor among thieves. Well, Eddie Coyle tries to have a sense of honor, but it's difficult. It's difficult. It's impossible. The fellow on the higher level up is called Jackie Brown. Yeah, you heard that name before, and you know who this film obviously impressed. This is a Stephen Keats character. And so Eddie Coyle is trying to figure out whether this much younger fellow, Jackie Brown, is reliable. He starts talking about knuckles, the knuckles on your hand. He says, count as many as you want. As many as you got, I got 4 more. You know how I got those? I bought some stuff from a man. I knew his name. The stuff was traced. The guy I bought it for, he's at MCI Walpole for 15 to 25, still in there. But he had some friends. I got an extra set of knuckles. They put your hand in a drawer, then somebody kicks the drawer shut. Hurt like a bastard. Jackie Brown says, Jesus. Eddie Coyle says, what makes it hurt worse, what makes it hurt more is knowing what's going to happen to you, you know? There you are. They just come up to you and say, look, you made somebody mad. You made a big mistake, and now there's somebody doing time for it. There's nothing personal in it, you understand, but it just has to be done. Now get your hand out there. You think about not doing it, you know? When I was a kid in Sunday school, this nun, she used to say, stick your hand out. I stick my hand out. Whap. She'd knock me across the knuckles with a steel-edged ruler. So one day I says, when she told me, stick your hand out, I says, no. She whacked me right across the face with the ruler. Same thing. They put your hand in a drawer. Somebody kicks the drawer shut. Ever hear bones breaking? Just like a man snapping a shingle. Hurts like a bastard. There's a curious anachronism there, talking about nuns at Sunday school. Catholics don't go to Sunday school because they get religious instruction from Monday to Friday. They go to church on Sunday. Maybe it was just, you know, an error that he made. There's other errors in this. Another strange thing, and again, one gets the impression that this was deliberate. You know, people make mistakes when they are speaking. There's a lot of talk about selling machine guns in this movie, and Robert Mitchum says, I can't imagine why anyone would need a machine gun. I would suggest they'd want machine guns because they look cool, and perhaps the people, yes, he says, I've never been able to understand a man that wanted to use a machine gun. The best all-round item is the 4-round Smith. That's Smith & Wesson. You can lift it, she goes where you point it. Well, it's not a machine gun that we see. It's an M16, which is a semi-automatic rifle. I don't know whether we're supposed to believe that Robert Mitchum doesn't know the difference between a semi-automatic and a fully automatic weapon, or it just, you know, perhaps that's the way they discussed, you know, Army issue rifles at the time. They called them machine guns. It's a mystery, you know, but I like that sort of thing. I'm also impressed by Jackie Brown's car. And it's the worst car someone like him could possibly drive. It is a 1971 Plymouth Roadrunner in this sickly green color. I mean, this is a car that stands out a mile. You know, you want to drive a Buick or something like that if you're in this business. But no, this guy's got to show off. And I'm thinking maybe this was an homage by Peter Yates to Jean-Pierre Melville, who, as you know, I've talked about him on Theater Thursday. He made a bunch of films about French gangsters, and they all drive American cars, which, again, if you were a French gangster, you wouldn't want to drive an American car, particularly the ones that he chooses, because it would be the only car that looked like that on the road. But so I'm thinking, you know, what Melville did was he took America to France, and perhaps what Yates was doing here was taking it back from France to America. Someone at the invaluable IMCDB website, where you can learn about all the cars that are in films, just as previously I had referred to the invaluable IMFDB, which is the Internet Movie Firearms database. But someone points out about this car is incorrectly, possibly done on purpose, said to have a 383 Hemi in it. Yes, there's a discussion. I always wanted to see what these things could do. You get the Magnum Mill. No, I got the Hemi, the 383 Hemi. Well, my father worked for Chrysler, and, you know, Hemis were 426 cubic inches, an enormously powerful engine. But one of the things that Jackie Brown says in this, life's hard, man, but it's harder if you're stupid. But I guess people in that business can't help being in that business, or else they wouldn't be in that business to begin with. So Richard Jordan plays a policeman who has a lot of snitches working for him, and unwillingly, I suppose, although Peter Boyle gets $20 a week from him, and it doesn't sound like much, but that's worth, I don't know, what, $300 now, today's money. And Eddie Coyle is a snitch too, and Eddie Coyle is snitching because he's about to be sent to prison for a couple of years in New Hampshire, which is where he drove the truck that was full of stolen goods. Now, there's something valuable that Eddie Coyle could definitely give, but he doesn't want to, because it would, he'd be ratting on a friend or someone who believes to be a friend. And his disposition becomes more desperate. He sells out Alex Rocco and his gang, and they have come up with what they believe is a genius way to make money. But you see them casing banks. I love that. You know, these guys have, they know what they're doing. They put in the effort, to get the information. They do a home invasion of the bank president. And there he is at the dinner table, the breakfast table, with the wife and kiddies, and they're wearing these masks, the plastic masks, which make people look terrifying. And they announce that he's going to go to the bank. He's going to let them into the vault. They're going to get the money. If anything happens, they're going to hurt his wife and his children. And this works. Of course, home invasion, forcible confinement, armed robbery. Yeah, it's all beer and Skittles until you end up with a 25-year stretch. And we see in one of the scenes, we see some would-be hero pushing the silent alarm button. And again, you know the cliche, why do you want to die for someone else's money? This film is prescient because we have had so many movies about the Boston Irish in recent years. And, in the old days, the Irish in Boston took great pains to be considered genteel. But that all fell apart by about 1970. Boston was a victim of the Second Vatican Council and a victim of forced busing. And the Boston Irish took to crime in drugs in a very big way. Now, they seem to be rather boastful about it, but back then it was very properly considered shameful. There's no swaggering, there's no Irish swaggering in this movie, and it's all the better for it. This is a bunch of people. Some are stupid, some are merely desperate, trying to survive and trying to, carve out a moral code which they can live with. But of course, the harder you're pushed by the law, the more your moral code falls away. And we see this. We see this in the film. The dialogue, which comes largely from Higgins' novel, is it's great. Of course, Bullitt had one of the most famous car chases in cinematic history. This has a very short car chase, very short indeed. It's basically a bunch of guys going from one place to another, one dreary place to another, to do some task, and then talking about it. I mentioned Quentin Tarantino. If you've seen Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction, you know that this film was an enormous influence on him, just as the films of Jean-Pierre Melville were enormous influences on him. I suppose this is, in a way, like Breaking Away, a portrait of vanished America. So it has an anthropological value. But no, it's a great movie because it shows men working, and it's an honest depiction of a subsection of American working men, low rent hoods. So those are my thoughts on the Friends of Eddie Coyle. Picasso 88 says, it was one of those late night discoveries I made flipping channels. Manhunter in the mid-90s was another one. And let's have a final look at the chat. Old colony projects in Southie, says Chogoken 666. You know what the sound of what the 2001 theme is? That's the sound of Mitchum waking up, says Peter Boyle. I should mention, there is a very long profile of Robert Mitchum and the production of this film that appeared in Rolling Stone in March 1973 by Grover Lewis, and it is really good. Rolling Stone didn't just used to lick the boots of rock stars back in the 70s. It did a lot of excellent journalism, and you can find this online. The piece is called Robert Mitchum, the Last Celluloid Desperado. Now, even back then, in 1973, there was thought to be something of an unworldly quality about Robert Mitchum, not just because he had a famous marijuana bust, or he played the bongos, or he was a poet, or whatever. He seemed to be a man apart from others, a man from another time. There was an aura about him, and he describes, the author describes just how excited people were when he appeared on the set. The gaffers and grips, the electricians and sound men, all the technicians begin to mill around briskly on the thick sodden grass adjacent to the ice-rimmed children's wading pool. Even the park's casual strollers, walking their diuretic poodles and mastiffs, begin to form small, excited queues, because word has it that Robert Mitchum, fabled wild boy of the road, myth-dripping bête noir of more than 100 movies, is arising and coming to the location site before noon. Yes, those were the days when movie stars, well, some of them were larger than life. Joekin666 says, we had one of those all-white projects in my neighborhood when I was growing up. The over-sentimental party will definitely ban Tarantino, says Debereus. So the screenplay was sloppy? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, people make errors all the time. People make mistakes in their speech constantly. And I think that Higgins and the screenwriter Monash decided to utilize that. Utilize that. That's what I think. That's my guess. Okay, so that's it for today. What is coming up next on Theater Thursday? Well, just give me a second here, and I will bring that up for you. Okay, Friends of Eddie Coyle. No. I got to put this in order. The film very much different from this. Next week, May the 27th, not May the 27th. It's a week after that because I lost a week. It's Carol Reed's 1948 masterpiece called The Fallen Idol, starring Ralph Richardson. As I said before, every man forgets what it was like to have been a boy. If you watch this film, you will remember. A week after that, I have Fred Zinnemann's classic from 1966, A Man for All Seasons. And on a week after that, Kent Jones, a documentary, Hitchcock Truffaut. I'm going to be talking about Cultured Grugs by John Chapman on the book club tomorrow. If you like this show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which I could really use at this time, my PayPal account is attached to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada and would like to make a donation to the live stream, it can be done directly through Interact at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.